स्टेटलेसनेस वा एसओएस पडकास्टको यो सेकेन्ड सिजन वा सत्रको यो एपिसोडमा यहाँहरू सम्पूर्ण हाम्रो सबै दर्शक र लिसनर्स र भ्युवर्सलाई स्वागत गर्न चाहन्छु। म नेहा गुरुङ, आजको यस एपिसोडको होस्ट। र एसओएस पडकास्ट पहिलो पटक सुन्दै वा हेर्दै हुनुहुन्छ भने एसओएस पडकास्ट चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि हामी नेपालमा भएको विभेदकारी कानुनबाट जति पनि जना प्रभावित हुनुहुन्छ, विभेदकारी नागरिकता सम्बन्धी कानुनबाट जतिजना प्रभावित हुनुहुन्छ उहाँहरूको कथाहरू सुन्ने र उहाँहरूको कथामा समर्पित अडियो र भिडियो पडकास्ट हो। र आजको एपिसोड भने अलिकति फरक हुन जाँदैछ। आजको एपिसोडमा चाहिँ हामी अरू एपिसोडमा चाहिँ नर्मली हामी के कुरा गर्छौँ भन्दाखेरि नेपालकै अतिथिहरूसँग नेपालमा भएको कानुनको विभेद, नेपालमा भएको यो नागरिकता सम्बन्धी कानुनमा भएको विभेदहरू, त्यसमा भएको प्रगतिहरू, यो नेपालमा भएको एडभोकेसी एफर्ट्सहरू, त्यो विषयमा वकालतका प्रयासहरूको बारेमा कुरा गर्छौँ। र विशेष गरी नेपालमा जतिजना पनि नागरिकताको कानुनबाट प्रभावित भएर आफ्नो जीवन अनागरिक भएर बिताइरहनु भएको छ उहाँहरूको कथाको बारेमा उहाँहरूसँग कुरा गर्छौँ होइन। तर आजको एपिसोड चाहिँ अलिकति नेपालबाट बाहिर गएर अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय लेभलमा चाहिँ कसरी यो स्टेटलेसनेस अथवा राज्यविहीनता अनि त्यसपछि को कुराहरू र यो यस्तो विषयमा चाहिँ नि अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय लेभलमा कस्तो पहल भइरहेको छ, अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय लेभलमा कस्तो स्थिति छ भन्ने विषयमा नि हामी आज अलिकति अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय लेभलमा कुरा गर्न जाँदैछौँ र यसबाट पनि नेपालले के लिन सक्छ भन्ने कुरा पनि गर्छौँ। र अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय लेभलमा यो विषयमा कुराकानी गर्ने अथवा यो विषयलाई चाहिँ उठान गर्ने, यसको विषयमा वकालत गर्ने व्यक्तित्वहरू चाहिँ को हुनुहुन्छ भन्ने बारेमा पनि हामी र कुरा गर्छौँ। र उहाँहरूको पर्सनल लाइफ, उहाँहरूको चाहिँ व्यक्तिगत जीवन, उहाँहरूले किन यसमा वकालत गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ भन्ने बारेमा पनि हामी मिठो कुराकानीहरू गर्छौँ। हामीसँग लास्टमा बस्दिनु होला। र यति भन्दै आज सन्दर्भ चाहिँ अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय छ र हामीसँग विभिन्न देशहरूबाट पनि व्यक्तित्वहरू आउनुभएको छ र सन्दर्भ अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय भएको भएर म अब यस पश्चात चाहिँ अङ्ग्रेजीमा कुरा गर्नेछु। यति भन्दै I'll switch to English now. So today we have with us three very, very special guests. And first of all, I'd like to thank all our guests here for making time despite your busy schedule, and at the same time, despite the timings that you all are in different countries. First, I'd like to introduce Bina Ramanand. She is currently based in Malaysia. I'm all stuck in Nepal. So she's currently based in Malaysia. She is the leader of, she is leading an organization called Family Frontier in Malaysia, and it's an organization that specifically works for equal nationality rights for women in Malaysia, and we would love to hear more about it. And your work, Binaji, never ceases to amaze me or inspire me. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
The second guest we have is Catherine Harrington. She is currently based in USA. She's a campaign manager at Global Campaign for Equal Nationality Rights, in short, GCENR. She's an absolute pioneer advocate for gender equal citizenship rights globally. And we're very, very happy to have you as well.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Neha. Thank you, and for your kind words.
And the third guest we have is Amal de Chickera. He is currently based in UK, and he's a co-founder and co-director at Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion. Welcome to our podcast as well.
Thank you, Neha. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So let's start with our conversation. And the first thing I would like to know is from Binaji, because your work in Malaysia has always inspired me and Kapin and my mother as well. So I just want to know, because I think what Malaysia has and what Nepal has, the issue of citizenship on gender discriminatory context, is somewhere similar. So I would like to know about citizenship rights issues in in Malaysia, and what are the root causes of the discriminatory citizenship laws that exist in Malaysia right now?
Yes, and thank you so much, Neha, for having us here. And really, it's an honor to be sharing our experience here in Malaysia. And let me tell you that many times we have actually copied what you all do in Nepal. So I think the admiration is mutual. And let's go to the root causes for the inability of Malaysian women to pass on citizenship to their overseas born children. When we took up this issue, we thought it will be really easy because we expected that the government would, want to protect its women and children and safeguard their rights. And it's been a long fight. We started, correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, I think we started in 2018 when we had our first consultation. We are now in 2024, and I hope we certainly are nearer the goal of getting the reform. However, what has been the obstruction? What are the root causes? Is some of the outdated citizenship laws that were established over 60 years ago and may not reflect the current norms and values regarding gender equality and parental rights. Also, patriarchy, I think, reigns supreme as traditional gender roles and patriarchal attitudes may be influenced by the initial formation of citizenship laws and the prioritization of the father over the mother. And I think basically in those days, it was the men who used to go out and travel. So, they didn't think that women, as there will come a time when women will be traveling on their own, going overseas for their studies, and the law needs to be equal. While other countries changed, Malaysia didn't. So Malaysia remains one in 24 countries that is yet to amend its discriminatory laws, citizenship laws. There are national security concerns. The weaponization of national security may have led to this stringent citizenship laws aimed at controlling the demographics of the country, favoring paternal lineage for citizenship transmission. Often we get this from also the public will say that, oh, just like how your name follows the father, therefore the child should follow the father's citizenship. But really it is the opposite because, the mothers bear the child and bear a lot, especially in the Asian context. They bear, they are the carers for their children. And the gatekeeping of citizenship, the bureaucratic hurdles, the biases in the approval processes, particularly for children born abroad, contributes to the perpetuation of these practices and the lack of legal reform. So despite the progress and calls for gender equality, there's a lack of political will. But that being said, what has happened is there was so much of outcry, and like this has become a national issue. So it really made the government give a commitment on the citizenship for overseas born children. But it's been delayed a lot, and we are hoping that in the next session in Parliament that they will table this amendment. So that is where we are with regard to the discriminatory citizenship laws in Malaysia. Neha?
Thank you for so much for sharing that, Binaji, because just like you said, even in Nepali law, we have this provision, the constitutional provision itself that says if the father is unidentified and the person wants to acquire citizenship from mother, then the person has to be born in Nepal and has to be residing in Nepal. Like what happens if the father is unidentified and the child is born outside the country? The law completely does not have any provision, like it completely discriminates women in that regards. So that is where we're currently at as well, and that is where I think I find similarities between Nepal and Malaysia. And talking about Malaysia, the Malaysian campaign has really is really sort of a bit ahead than Nepal's campaign, because now you've already you just now said that this issue has become a national issue, right? So to become a national issue, I'm sure there have been so many efforts and advocacy efforts that were made in order for it to establish as a national issue, and then for ensure that political parties actually recognize and give attention to it. Could you share like briefly about like what were those advocacy efforts that you did, like those creative advocacy efforts that you did to make this issue a national issue?
So in Malaysia, Family Frontiers uses a multi-dimensional approach. Basically because like I sometimes say that we didn't know what exactly worked and we needed to push from all directions. So the highlight, of course, is the Mothers Campaign, and the Malaysian mothers themselves highlight their stories, which is on their lived experiences in newspapers, in TV. They come on national TV. They have their own social media. Their reach is really far more wider, I think, than Family Frontiers. In fact, now a lot of the reporters and journalists the media connects with them directly. And I think it was, their stories were unique. Their impact really made the public support this amendment. So the Malaysian mothers were at the forefront. And then we had the media as well. And because we also have a constitutional case in the courts, we had the media who, they loved this human interest stories. They were publishing stories on the mothers. And I think we got a lot of coverage for not just the case, but every time the mothers had an activity, the media was there supporting them, highlighting their stories. And as a result, that other citizenship categories of citizenship deprivation got highlighted, which then, it kind of brought something that was really under the carpet out in the open. What we did, so the media was also responsible for highlighting the issue. We also go to Parliament, so we ask MPs to ask questions on our behalf. We do briefings for MPs. We also have used the Parliament machinery quite actively in terms of using the Parliament Select Committee. So we have taken the complaint, I think, more than twice to the Select Committee on Women and Children. And so again, the Parliament gets more familiar with the issue. Also, there are debates on the issue in Parliament because because of the briefings that we have done. We also have we do the international treaties reporting. So when we reported to UPR, for the UPR, I think there were a lot of recommendations on citizenship and statelessness. We're going to CEDAW in May. So all the international treaties, we make sure that we report on the issue. And further, we also are in several coalitions. So it's national coalitions, regional coalitions, as well as global coalitions. So together it all feeds into the other. And so the issue really is widely discussed. The issue is not just in the children's groups, but in the women's groups discuss the issue. They support us, there's solidarity. So apart from being in various coalitions and building the coalitions, we have a lot of capacity building for youth as well as for our mothers. And there's a lot of public outreach program, like next week we would be speaking at the law faculty on the issue. So there's a lot of public outreach and support. We also do collaborations with other organizations, and that makes it a bit easier and does not allow us to feel so alone. So those are some of the advocacy tools that we use?
I think it really inspired me when I heard about these. You know how Malaysian mothers themselves came out, and then they, like you mentioned, it's a very unique impact that they had. Um, and also the fact that you mentioned that being in so many coalitions and groups and then gathering the momentum, I think it's very important for us not to feel alone and then have everyone in this working together, and taking all the multi-pronged approaches, anything that's possible to keep this issue afloat and then work for it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will come back to you more on the campaign. I would like to ask our next speaker, our next guest, Catherine G, about her work in the global campaign on equal national rights. Actually, what really amazes me about Catherine G is that you are working globally on an issue which is very specific on even in like the nationality rights issue, but very specific, which is gender discrimination nationality laws. I sometimes I just find myself curious to know um, why did you choose to work on this issue?
Thanks, Neha. I mean, following Bina, I just want to say first that, managing the global campaign for equal nationality rights, I always tell everyone the most amazing part of my job is the unbelievable activists that I get to work with, like Bina. And so I'm inspired by them every day. And I consider it a real privilege to work with people like Bina and yourself, Neha. Let's be honest, Amal as well. So just wanted to start off by saying that. So I ended up working on this issue. In grad school, I was always passionate about human rights issues and the non-discrimination issues of justice, the idea that any person, that any human would be discriminated against and treated unfairly and unjustly and would suffer simply because of discrimination on some grounds about who they are. I find that deeply upsetting, as I think as most people do. And as I was going through my studies, I didn't initially plan to specifically focus on gender equality or women's equal rights. But as I was working more through graduate school and during my studies, and looking and learning about international laws and conventions, I ended up at the time actually writing my thesis on the issue of Afghan women's role in peace building and reconstruction in Afghanistan, and became very interested in the international movement for gender equality, the international feminist movement. And I ended up starting after graduate school working for an organization that is an international women's rights organization. Their name is Women's Learning Partnership. They don't focus on really being high profile and getting a lot of attention here. They were actually founded by the first minister of women's affairs in Iran before the revolution. She's been living in exile since. And she founded the organization with several feminist activists from the global south, from several different countries, and they formed this partnership of women's rights organizations based in 20 different countries, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, in actually in Malaysia as well, in Asia. And through working for that organization and working with our partner organizations, women's rights organizations that were working on kind of the fundamental issues, the most pressing issues that were facing women in those countries in terms of achieving equality. One of the major issues that many of those organizations were working on or had recently achieved reforms because of their activism was the question of gender equality and nationality laws. And so I think for folks that aren't familiar with this issue, or that are, coming from the outside or not coming from a country where there are many affected people, it might sound like something that is very specific and niche, and but when you really think about it, and you think about it as a question of equality and what it means to be a citizen in society, especially in democracies, but let's face it, we're working in a number of countries that are not democracies as well. But what does it mean to be a member of the national family and your political personhood when you have a nationality law that does not allow women to pass citizenship, that very foundational part of national identity, to their children, to their non-citizen spouses, or to even acquire or retain or change their nationality on an equal basis with men? That is so very clearly undermining the very principle of equal citizenship. It's undermining the principle of women's equality in the family. And as I learned more about this and started doing more work on gender equality, it's very clear that when you look at the future that we want to build, if we want to build sustainable, if we talk about development, we talk about sustainable development, if we talk about building just democratic societies, none of those can be achieved in the absence of equal citizenship that's reflected in nationality laws. And we haven't even, and I'm not going to get to, I know we'll talk about this later in the conversation, but that's before even talking about all of the human rights violations that are suffered by impacted children and spouses and families. But at that very, very fundamental core level, the question of equal citizenship and as it's reflected in nationality laws was something that I found to be so compelling. And so I was very fortunate when this opportunity arose to get involved to start the global campaign for equal nationality rights and then build out our coalition. So that's maybe a long answer as to how I got here.
Thank you so much for sharing that journey with us, because that's really inspiring for me as well. Because for me personally, I got into this issue not by choice, but by something that I faced myself. But then finding people who really care about this issue, even though they're not directly impacted, but they understand and empathize that this is a grave violation of human rights and have been passionately working for it. It really gives a sense of, like Binaji mentioned, a sense of community and sense of support, which is extremely motivating and inspiring, and it helps us not to feel alone. So thank you so much for whatever you're doing. And I would actually also like to ask similar question with Amalji. I would like to ask you, I think I'm not sure, but I think that you've worked in this issue like more than 15, 20 years. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that ISI was established in around 2014, but way before that, you've been continuously working on this issue. Correct my numbers, but I'm sure I know that you've been working a long time on this issue. I just wanted to know that, like, you founded Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion, ISI, and then have been passionately working on this issue day in and day out. And then recently, ISI also organizes huge global conference on statelessness. And there has been a lot of things changed in the past few years in the statelessness ecosystem about how global sort of the system acknowledges statelessness has sort of slightly changed than what it has been before. I just wanted to know, like, coming from Sri Lanka, being a Sri Lankan lawyer, and then also having this you've shared a lot about your journey with us, but also I would like our viewers to also know, like, how as a Sri Lankan lawyer and also as a person who was very interested in theater before, and then how did you find your passion in working for the specific issue? Why do you think it is so important to you?
Thank you, Neha. Yeah, I've been working on this issue since 2008. So like in my 17th year now, which maybe is too long. But yeah, just going back in terms of why and how I ended up working specifically on statelessness, I think it's a combination of happy accident and coincidence, but also that there's been a definite kind of pathway that I followed in terms of my life journey. So I grew up in Sri Lanka during the height of the civil war. Like my whole childhood was like our reality in Sri Lanka was one of war. And my family was a family which both my parents were very kind of committed to issues of social justice, were working on issues of ethnic reconciliation and human rights. And these are the conversations that we kind of had as kids growing up around the dinner table. We met our parents' friends who kind of also were similarly kind of working on social justice issues. So that's the environment in which we grew up. And I think it meant that for me and my sister and brother, we were naturally kind of drawn and inclined towards finding our own different ways to continue to work uh, in issues of social justice. And in terms of theater, my sister, she's actually she's a theater practitioner, and when we were kids, we set up a theater group, and I was involved in that, and that became a vehicle through which we were able to explore and kind of really address and speak about issues that were very difficult to speak about in Sri Lanka, not just in terms of the ethnic conflict, but also in terms of sexual orientation and identity and domestic violence. And we did pieces on very challenging and difficult issues to have social conversations on. I myself became a law student, and I took that was the course that my career took. And having graduated in Colombo, I went on to work for a couple of human rights organizations in Sri Lanka, documenting post-tsunami rehabilitation efforts, documenting abductions and disappearances in the context of the ethnic conflict. And then in 2007, I moved to the UK to do my master's, initially very much with the intention of returning back to Sri Lanka to continue my human rights work there. But when I was close to finishing up my thesis, my supervisor at the time, he just sent me this interesting looking job application. I said, why don't you give it a go? And it was about, it was an application to work on a project which looked at the detention and discrimination of stateless people around the world. And to my embarrassment, the word statelessness was a new word to me, even though there was a very large community in Sri Lanka who had historically been stateless. And it's a community I had worked closely with and on whose behalf I kind of engaged on their various human rights challenges. But we just didn't have the vocabulary in Sri Lanka at the time to speak of them as stateless. Instead, we spoke of them as the hill country Tamil community who were non-citizens, who had been brought to Sri Lanka as bonded labor during the colonial period. And it was very much talking about it as an issue and working on it as an issue which was about fighting for their right to citizenship, but without that added kind of nuance and understanding that actually there's a deeper challenge here of the fact that they had no access to any citizenship. So the job looked interesting, and I was lucky enough to get the job. And that exposed me to a whole new world in terms of this issue, which at its very core is a human rights issue. It's about social justice. It's about political exclusion. It's about citizenship. It's about the state of our democracies. It's about rising authoritarianism. It's an issue which really encapsulates that statement that the personal is political. Because inflicting statelessness on people has a deeply personal kind of consequence and impact on themselves, on their identity, on the size of their world. And statelessness is imposed and inflicted on people for deeply political reasons, as a kind of a technology of exclusion and a technology of pushing people to the margins of society, of othering them, and of kind of subjecting them to deeper human rights violations as well. And of course, the situation in Nepal is very much a situation of gender discrimination being the vehicle through which this is done, but in a way which also intersects so much with other forms of discrimination, whether it's caste-based discrimination or discrimination in relation to socioeconomic status, ethnicity, etc. And this is also what we would find when we talk about statelessness in many other countries and contexts of the world, where you simplify the issue at your own risk, because actually it's an issue which is interwoven and interconnected with a range of other socio-political, economic, and legal challenges. And what we've learned the more we've engaged on this issue is that unpacking statelessness, addressing statelessness is a way of getting to the root of many of the evils of society, of the way we've organized ourselves politically, and of a lot of the big global human rights challenges that we speak of. So I think why I've stuck with the issue so long is because I felt an obligation, given how marginalized the issue is within human rights spaces and how marginalized it has been. But also, it's an issue which kind of deserves so much attention because it is so complicated, because it is so difficult to unravel. And it's also an issue which has given me so much, and this sounds like a very weird thing to say, but in terms of the community that I've found, I mean, amazing human beings like the three of you and so many others, that we found each other through our lived experience and through our work on this issue. And that's not something that you can walk away from. So it actually is it's a very privileged position to be in. And yeah, I'm delighted to be sharing this platform with all of you.
The feeling is mutual, Amalji, and thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And I think on the same context, for our viewers, at least, because we've been using this word statelessness so much in our podcast today, and this is a word that we reject in Nepal, that is politically. Our government does not recognize that we have the issue of statelessness. We still can pursue this issue from the gender uh, lens only. Like we can use CEDAW, we can use other human rights instruments. We can tackle this issue with other human rights instruments as well that Nepal has signed. We have not signed the Statelessness Convention, and which is why the government, I mean government denies the existence of statelessness in Nepal. And like you mentioned, in like similar to Sri Lanka, like you mentioned, like how there was no vocabulary to define the situation or the status of people who did not have citizenship, and they were simply called citizenshipless people, people who did not have citizenship. So that is what we are calling. That is the same stage we're in right now in Nepal. For example, the government denies that we have statelessness, and it says that we only have citizenship-less problems, which gradually can, like, easily people can acquire citizenship, and it is a non-issue. So I just want to ask for our viewers' sake, like, how does the international law define statelessness, and like like what kind of people fall under this definition per se?
The Nepali government isn't alone in kind of committing all kinds of verbal gymnastics to try and define an issue in a way which is inaccurate, right? You find that lots of states do that and on a range of human rights issues as well. The Latvian government also does that in regard to statelessness. So they refer to the stateless community in Latvia as Latvian non-citizens, which is a nonsensical term. How can you be Latvian and a non-citizen? And similarly, when close to 1 million Rohingya refugees fled over to Bangladesh in 2017 at the height of the genocide against the Rohingya community, Bangladesh referred to these people as forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals, when all of those words are actually problematic. They were stateless, they were refugees, and here you have them being defined in a completely different way. So the definition of statelessness is a definition of fact. It's not a definition of norm. And that's a very important kind of thing to be mindful of. And what that means is you are defining something that you can describe. You're not defining something that's a principle that you want to apply. So a stateless person under international law is a person who is not recognized as a citizen of by any state under the operation of its law. Now, there are a few points to this definition which are quite important. One point is the phrase by any state. And what that means is that under international law, it is only states that have the power to grant citizenship to a person. And so if you have entities whose statehood is challenged and not recognized, or entities that don't meet the criteria of statehood, they may well have their own citizenship laws and they may well grant citizenship to their population, but that citizenship is likely to be meaningless internationally. And that's a situation that we find in several contexts, such as with Western Sahara or with Abkhazia, uh, uh, Somaliland, etc. Now, that part of the definition applies to a very small percentage of people in the world, because most people in the world live in countries that are recognized as states. And then it's the other relevant part of the definition which comes into play, which is not recognized as a citizen under the operation of its law. Now, one important point about this definition, and this goes to the Nepali government's argument that people can acquire Nepali citizenship, is the definition is about your current status. It's not about your potential or possible future status. It's someone who is not recognized. It's not someone who may not be recognized or someone who could potentially not be recognized in the future. And therefore, if there is a person in Nepal today who does not have Nepali citizenship, it doesn't matter that they can acquire Nepali citizenship in the future. They are stateless until they do acquire Nepali citizenship. And that's a very important clarifier. The second important kind of interpretive guidance on this definition is that the term under the operation of its law means both what the law says, but also how the law is implemented.
Right.
And you will have laws which are on the face of it discriminatory, as the law in Malaysia is, as the law in Nepal is, which excludes certain people from accessing citizenship. And that is about what the law says. But you will also have laws, whether they are discriminatory or not, being applied in a more discriminatory manner, because the people who have the power to implement the law, the relevant authorities in the state, they carry with them their own prejudices, their own stereotypes. They are the implementers of government policies which can be very discriminatory, very racist, etc. And so you find people interpreting and applying laws in discriminatory manners as well, which means that someone who should, under the letter of the law, get citizenship may not get that citizenship because the law is not implemented properly.
Right.
In either situation, whether you have been excluded from citizenship because the law very clearly excludes you from citizenship, as is the case with the Rohingya, for example, from Myanmar, or if you've been excluded from citizenship because even though you should get citizenship, the law is implemented in a discriminatory way. In both of those situations, if the consequence is you don't have the citizenship of any state, in that moment, you are stateless. And I think that is an important message to take to state authorities in advocacy, because you can't hide behind the fact that the law is good in the way it's written, or you can't hide behind the fact that if people don't have documents, they can apply and get their documents, and then maybe 2 years down the line, they'll be able to get citizenship. All of those conditionalities are irrelevant. If a person doesn't have citizenship in this moment, they are stateless.
And would it also make sense to mention in our advocacy that the definition of statelessness is actually a customary international law, even like would that make sense to put in our argument? I
think it does, and I think I mean when you speak of advocacy, this is interesting, right? I mean, I don't think the terminology of statelessness itself is that useful in advocacy. I mean, it is useful to a degree, And this is why I said the statelessness definition is one of fact, it's not one of norm.
Right.
So all you are doing is you are describing that here's a group of people who don't have citizenship.
Exactly.
And the fact that they don't have citizenship is a symptom of something that's deeper. And
Right.
that symptom is that these are people who've been denied their right to nationality. And it's the right to nationality which I think is a stronger basis for advocacy. Because everyone has the right to nationality under international human rights law, and everyone has the equal right to nationality, which is why women and men across ethnicities, across racial groups, across religious groups, etc., all should have the equal right to nationality. And that's where you're bringing in the normative argument to push states to uphold the obligations that they themselves have signed up to, and which they express through their own constitutions and through their ratification of international human rights treaties.
On the same context, I would like to, I'm going from backward to upward in terms of having conversation with you guys. So I would like to go to Catherine G. On the same context, when we talk about gender discriminatory citizenship laws, I have had conversation with many like important stakeholders who hold very powerful positions and who holds the position of where they can in a decision-making positions. And even there, when I say like if like the gender discriminatory citizenship laws has a consequences, a statelessness consequences, I have been blatantly denied that there is sort of any consequences of statelessness because of gender discriminatory citizenship laws. It's just a gender discriminatory, which I completely understand as well, because just because there is a just because there is certain, for example, in Nepal, if I have to say currently, recently the Citizenship Act had been amended. And in that amendment, what we have is that a mother can pass on citizenship to children, because the Constitution also says that mother can pass on citizenship to children, but there are multiple conditions attached to it. The first condition is that the father has to be Nepali. The children will get citizenship at descent, which is established as a right. The second is like a mother has to the father of or the husband of that mother has to be if the husband is a foreigner, then the child will get a naturalized citizenship, and if the father is unidentified, then the mother and the in the new Citizenship Act, it mentions that the mother and the child, the person both has to sign a self-declaration form, and then they can get the citizenship. The new issue that has come up is that if by any chance in the school certificates, if the father's surname or his name is written, but the father is like he's gone, like his unidentified, but his name is written in the certificates, then the authorities are confused whether to call that father unidentified or not. And for that reason, many mothers and many individuals seeking citizenship from mothers are currently denied citizenship just because the father's name is written on certificates. So I just want to know from your perspective, you having worked on gender discriminatory citizenship laws globally, and your observation as an expert, how does these gender discriminatory citizenship laws sort of translate, and not necessarily, but at the same time translate into statelessness, and how many countries have gender discriminatory citizenship laws, and also maybe I can ask in the same question, like for your insight on like if the countries that have equal citizenship rights, if we can also share like why do countries have equal citizenship rights when countries like Nepal, like landlocked countries like Nepal, we say that nationalism is threatened when you get citizenship from mothers, because you know if the father is foreigner, then the children becomes foreigner, and the foreigner children, you know, has jeopardizes the nationalism and all. So if you could cover all of these curiosity in your answer.
I think first, if we start with everything that you just said about all of those conditions that must be satisfied in order for the child of a Nepali citizen who happens to be a female to get nationality, all of those things that you laid out are very clear that Nepal right now still has one of the most discriminatory nationality laws against women in the world. Okay, so even with all of that progress in terms of these steps that happen with the latest Citizenship Amendment Act, the law is highly, highly discriminatory against Nepali women. So if you look globally, over 90% of countries in the world uphold women and men's equal right to pass citizenship to their children. There are only 24 countries left in the entire world, including Nepal, that do not uphold a female citizen's right to pass citizenship to their children on an equal basis with men. Now, you laid out all of these different conditions and potential pathways for children of Nepali women to possibly maybe get citizenship if, they overcome all of those conditions and the local authority agrees that they deserve it and they've met these criteria. And it's very important, any step towards anyone who does not have citizenship or that lacked access to citizenship, any way for them to be able to acquire nationality is hugely important. All of those people that might benefit now from that opportunity, that is going to change their lives, as you know very well. But the reality is the nationality law of Nepal is still very clearly denying Nepali women equal nationality rights. Gender equality in nationality laws is actually when sometimes with legal text or nationality laws, some nationality laws are very complex and complicated, and there's all these different provisions. And, people ask me sometimes, oh, you must be a lawyer, you must have a law degree. I didn't go to law school. I studied international human rights law and other issues related to international relations and international affairs. But the truth is, you actually don't have to be a technical expert to understand gender equality and nationality laws. It's very, very simple. Most nationality laws that uphold gender equality, you actually don't need to make a distinction at all about whether or not the citizen is a man or a woman, whether it's the mother or the father. All the nationality needs to say, the law needs to say, is a citizen has the right to pass nationality to their child, regardless of whether the child is born inside or outside of the country. Full stop. A citizen has the right to pass citizenship to a foreign spouse or a non-citizen spouse, because that spouse might be stateless. They can set the parameters. They might say you have to be married for 5 years, or there's different parameters that a country has the sovereign right to establish in terms of access to citizenship. But what they do not have, and Amal was hitting on, under international law, under most countries' constitutions that say citizens have the right to equality under the law, the right to non-discrimination, there is no sovereign right under international law to deny a class of people the right to pass citizenship simply because they are female or male, or because of their race or their religion, etc., as Amal said. Now I want to make sure. Okay, so I was going through the questions that you asked me. So what is the picture globally? And then you asked kind of what are some of the arguments maybe that are used by those that aren't yet convinced that they should amend the nationality law. Is that right?
Yeah, and also like what are the benefits that the countries that already have equal citizenship rights? Like what are the countries who do not have equal citizenship rights losing?
Sure, absolutely. They're losing so much. So first, I think maybe what are some of those arguments that are used? First off, I mean, I've talked about this with colleagues and in different venues around the world, and it sounds funny at first, except when you realize how tragic the implications of this are. I can't tell you how many countries that I've visited that have gender discrimination in their nationality laws, where a government official, in justifying the discrimination in the law, will say, yes, yes, of course, you know, we don't want to discriminate, but we have a very unique situation here. And they all say we have a very unique situation here. And then they go on to describe very similar justifications, justifications in quotes, in countries around the world. So basically, you have a combination of sometimes fears, or I would say almost all of the time, fears about, well, if we allow women to pass citizenship to their children, all of these, you know, foreign men are going to want to come in and marry our women and potentially take jobs. And there's, you know, they will, you know, we have a national identity, and, you know, we want to uphold our, you know, our national identity, and maybe we don't want to open this up to foreigners then taking political power in the country, running for office, etc. You know, the money and the resources that could be lost from, you know, having these foreigners come in and, you know, having citizenship. And first off, what you see everywhere is, you know, you can have these reasons that are listed by government officials and even some people in the public that kind of have this misunderstanding. And what you see is there is an acceptance, because you could say those same things hypothetically about when men from the country marry a foreign woman, have children with a foreign woman. There's absolutely no question. These same authorities would never question a man's right to pass his citizenship to his child or even to his spouse. But there is an acceptance that it is actually okay to deny women equal rights because of X, Y, and Z reasons. So at the very, very fundamental level, gender discrimination and nationality laws persist in countries because there is an acceptance that it is okay to deny women equality in the law. And what you find is in all of the countries that still have gender discrimination in their nationality laws, it's not only in the nationality law, there is an acceptance in denying women equality in a host of laws. And nationality is oftentimes what I'd say is like the canary in the coal mine. If you have a country that's denying women equality in terms of their very right to pass citizenship, you are most certainly going to find discrimination in other areas of law. Now, you want to talk about the costs and the benefits of countries that have reformed their laws. So, you know, one thing that I think is very important to let these governments know in countries where gender discrimination and nationality laws persist, over 90% of countries globally uphold citizens' equal right to pass nationality to their children. Over 3/4, 75% of countries uphold comprehensive gender equality in their nationality laws, including women's equal ability to pass citizenship to a spouse on an equal basis with men. Now, those countries, including poor countries, rich countries, diverse countries with many different religious and ethnic groups, countries with very homogeneous groups of people, those countries are not suffering because of these laws. If anything, those governments understood when they undertook these laws, and you can see very tragically in the case of Nepal and in Malaysia and where this discrimination persists, that where you're denying equality in nationality laws and denying women the equal right to confer citizenship, you have children that are denied equal access to education, to healthcare, to reach their professional dreams as adults. And so what they really are doing is they're denying people that want to do nothing more than to contribute to what they see as their country, kids that consider themselves Nepali, consider themselves Malaysian, but they're denied the equal right to contribute to society. And it's actually society that is losing out on those contributions, and their own development, their own sustainable development is being impeded. You take instances like in Nepal and in other countries where a single child of a female citizen might have to go all the way to the Supreme Court just to
Right.
get the citizenship document. What an absolute waste of government resources that could be going towards much, much better things.
Could
And
you
so
also share the example of the mother who married a German guy, the example that is shared in the summit,
yes, yeah,
which was really nice, yeah.
yeah, and actually, and just if in case she's listening, I will remember her husband was Dutch, but they border Germany and Netherlands border each other. Okay. So yeah, I always remember this Nepali activist and mother. I met her my first time in Nepal with Amal. I think this was in 2019. Sorry, I meant to say 2015. And she said to me, you know, I was living in Nepal, and she's born and raised in Nepal, Nepali, you know, all the way back generations. And
Citizen of
man,
Nepal by descent, it's itself herself.
yeah, yes, citizen by descent herself. And there was a Dutch man who, I don't know if he came because he was traveling or if he had a business trip, but they met each other and they fell in love. And he wanted to propose marriage to her. And she said, I will only marry you if we can raise our family in Nepal. I love my country. I don't want to live abroad. I want to raise my family here. I want my children to be Nepali. I want my children to contribute to my country. And he said, absolutely. He loved Nepal. Nepal is an amazing country. He didn't want to leave. And so she said, you know, and they've been married, I'm sure, over 30 years. She said, he's more Nepali than I am. He speaks, you know, perfect Nepali. He, you know, can make the food. He's more Nepali than I am. They raised their family here. Now, this family happens to be more well-resourced, right? They had financial resources. They were able to send their children to private schools in Nepal because their children were not able to access Nepali citizenship because she, as a Nepali mother, she wasn't able to pass her citizenship. So they got a good education. The children wanted to have their professional careers in Nepal, but because of the severe lack of opportunities that they faced, lacking citizenship in Nepal, they ended up moving abroad and having very successful careers in international business, doing very well for themselves, but unable to do that in Nepal and make those contributions to Nepal. And what a loss for Nepal that those now, you know, young adults that have been very successful in their careers and would be contributing much to the country. And that's an example of a well-resourced family. What about those families where the mother doesn't have the resources to send their child to private school? Those kids that had so much potential and could go on to become lawyers and doctors and really contribute to Nepal's development, and yet they're denied these opportunities. And it's not just those families and children that suffer, it's Nepali society as a whole that suffers. So in closing my response, I would say that in the countries where reforms were achieved, they understood that it was both the right thing to do in terms of the necessity to uphold women's equal citizenship and nationality laws. And these laws were reflections of those governments' commitments to uphold gender equality. And the governments also understood that they were in their best interest to ensure that all children of citizens are included in the national family.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I had a podcast conversation recording also with Sabin Shrestha, Sabin sir. And there we also had a conversation there saying that how irrational this argument that Nepal gives, that if we give citizenship from mothers' names, then people will start getting, we do not, like, people will start getting, taking dual citizenship. Like, for example, they'll get citizenship from their Nepali mother if you give them the right. They'll also get it from Nepali mother, and they will also again get it from their father's country because, from father. So so that kind of irrational argument is what the government is giving, and because Nepal do not have the dual citizenship policy, we only have a like single citizenship policy, and we were having this conversation like how irrational it is because, like you mentioned, like 90% of the countries around the world ensure that women have equal citizenship to pass on equal citizenship rights for her to pass on her citizenship to children. So that means that even if Nepali if the father is Nepali and the mother is a foreigner, even then, like how do the country stop dual citizenship? Because the person will get the citizenship from Nepali father, and then like more than 90% of the countries will also give citizenship from mothers, right? So that doesn't stop the issue of the dual citizenship, or the nationalism, the xenophobia.
Yeah, this is such a perfect point. I'm so glad that you raised it. Because this is very important, because in a number of the countries there are bans on dual citizenship. So one most important point that you made is that, as you said, because the vast majority of countries uphold women's right to confer citizenship, that is an irrational argument, because obviously any Nepali man who has a child with any of the women from those 90% of countries, that child has the right to the mother's citizenship. But it doesn't mean that countries cannot have bans on dual nationality. I mean, of course, I think that most countries have come to the conclusion that it's actually in their best interest, but to allow more than dual nationality. But that's not the point here at all. A country has the right to say if they do not want to allow dual citizenship. But there are countries that do not allow dual citizenship, that uphold gender equality in their nationality laws. And it's very simple. We don't need to make this complicated. If the government officials want to say that's the one thing that's holding them back, here, we can fix this right now.
Right.
All you have to do is uphold citizens' equal right to pass nationality to their children. And when you have the opportunity for a child to have nationality, to have two different nationalities based on their parents' nationality, the child simply has to make a choice at 18 which of those nationalities they want to hold as an adult. So we don't have to make this complicated. You can uphold gender equality in your nationality law and not have dual citizenship. You're not saying that the citizen doesn't have an equal right to pass citizenship. You're simply saying that the child, once they become an adult, has to decide which one that they want to keep.
I would like to move on to Bina ji. Like, what has been your journey on starting this campaign, on starting the Family Frontiers, which is doing such an incredible work in Malaysia? And yeah, basically, what has been your journey, and what has been your reason that drove you to starting the Family Frontiers? And also, what are the challenges that you face along the way? Because I can tell you from my mother's experience as well, and I'm sure my mother and you have shared a lot of stories together, that there has been a lot of difficult times sharing our stories and traumas again and again, and at the same time listening to other people's who are facing the similar issues, their traumas and their experiences, their struggles, and at the same time having this societal sort of the pressure and the negative social narrative pressing on against us, and then there are so many social media backlashes, and many people who do not agree, and opposition people who really sometimes get at us. My mother herself like had a very severe social media sort of attack a few years back, when people who did not believe in this issue cracked down on her. Like, they really gave her a hard time. So it is a very difficult issue. I just want to know how your journey about establishing FF, working on this issue, and then also what are the struggles and how do you deal with it?
Thank you, Neha, for that question. But first, let me tell you, the wait it hasn't been a wait. I don't know where the time has gone, because it's been such an interesting conversation, and listening to Amal and Catherine and yourself, Neha. All of you all are so inspiring. And at the same time, Catherine, while you were saying this, it's like, it got me thinking, like, we've got this spate of rejections of mothers' applications for citizenship of their children. And the reason, they don't give reasons, so we kind of try to find out what is the reason for the rejection of these applications. We got a whole spate of about 25, 30 of them. And we realized after the analysis is these mothers had permanent residence in other countries. I mean, what is shocking is they would never ask a man that Have you got permanent residence in another country, and therefore we would not give your children citizenship? No, those children automatically get citizenship. And so, I mean, how do and are you saying that you don't want your citizens, the women, to be protected and safeguarded by having permanent residence so that they have independent status in another country, and they're not made dependent on their spouses? And it's really so infuriating to hear, this is the reason that these mothers are getting rejected. And there's no reason that's provided in the in this, in when they reject the application. And we just were analyzing it's because we are all in a group and we realized this and this. I was just looking at the comments just now on our mothers group, and I realized, wow, imagine they're just rejecting based on permanent residence. And yes, it is this anger that really started off my journey. I had no intention to become an activist at all. I was just an ordinary mother raising my children, and it was difficult once as a foreigner for me to admit my daughter into hospital, and she was having an asthmatic attack. So I just thought this is so difficult. I mean, these are basic things that as mothers we need to do, and yet we are unable to care for our children. So I thought, let's find a few other mothers in the same situation, and perhaps it'll make the journey easier. And so I put out a call to my friends, few of them who I knew were similar like me, a foreigner in this country, raising children. Everyone was very scared, I think. No one joined because I called for this in a cafe and nobody turned up. I was upset. I sat and cried for a while, but then I said, I've got to do something so that later I won't regret that I didn't try. And so I wrote my story down in that same restaurant that I was sitting in. I, wrote my story, and I thought, hey, why don't I now read it wherever I go? Doesn't matter if I have to start this on my own. I have no regrets that I did that. And I took that choice of, you know, telling myself that I should try. Those five mothers, it took many years before I could even get five mothers together. And I think I met another mother at a church group, and then her name is Asha Lim, and she took me to the women's groups, and we started our first focus group discussion back in 2007. And then we started foreign spouse support group. So basically, because I was a foreign spouse in Malaysia, and it was very difficult. The bureaucratic process was horrendous. It was easier for my foreign domestic worker to get a renewal on her visa. Like, she got it in 3 days. It took me 5 months, and I'm the mother of Malaysian children. Yeah, and I was employing, her as my domestic worker, and it was so easy. And I stood there and I said, is this it? I mean, you've given her a renewal, and there were like 3 documents, and in 3 days, and mine, I have to give 22 documents. It took me 5 months to renew my visa, and I had like infant children at that time. So that was the difficulty I faced. And then after that first focus group discussion in 2007, I thought I'll just capacitate myself. So I used to take leave and join any trainings that were there, because I knew nothing. And then I had a full-time job to pay the bills and use my weekends and free time while my kids were growing up to work on the issue. So I also joined a lot of coalitions because I didn't get spaces. And so these coalitions gave me spaces to speak to ministries and for others to get to know the issue. And everybody would laugh at me because when we went to events, I would sit very close to a mic so that when the question and answer came, I would be first at the mic to ask a question. to make sure that the minister never ran away without answering questions. So, yes, and funding, as everyone faces, funding was an issue. But really, the breakthrough happened is when that first call in April of 2018 was made by Catherine, and she says, shall we have a consultation on the issue of citizenship in Malaysia? And I recall that first time when we met, your mother was there, Deepthi, and a few other activists from other countries came to support the cause. And as I was walking towards them, I couldn't believe that people from all over the world were there, this small group of people who didn't know much about me, but had come to support me. And I really burst out crying because I used to be alone for so many years. And to see the support and solidarity I got was truly comforting, and it was an amazing feeling. And today, I mean, from that being alone, we provide service and guidance to spouses. There are about 35,000 of them on a Facebook page, and they ask queries and they seek guidance on that page. And then in 2020 we started on this citizenship. We took up a strategic litigation. Yeah. So that's where we are here at Family Frontiers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all those, Binaji. Not almost, you did make me emotional. Sharing all those journeys of yours. And I can so relate in so many ways your journey with my mother as well, because at the start, when she, for the first time, opened her Facebook page called Citizenship in the Name of Mother, there was a time when she was like, we had a small rental house, which was very expensive. We did not have any. My mom used to work in tourism, and it was really difficult economic situation. And then she was not able to get citizenship for us. And she was like very frustrated, and she did not know what to do. And like you said, there were no one there to support her. Like there were no one who said that, no, I think you're right. I think women need to have citizenship. Like the society did not believe in citizenship from women. So when she started this Facebook page, she used to come home after the office, and late into the night she used to check this Facebook page. She used to put status and people used to comment, and those comments were almost 99.9% negative. And then even then she used to continue, and then trying to understand what the society looks like at that stage. And then even there is like one new like or one new subscribers or a friend request in the page, she used to be so excited and share with us. And those were the lonely times of starting the advocacy. And I can so relate when you shared those things. That's why it's sort of, I could relate, and that sort of made me emotional as well. um Thank you for sharing them. I would like to sort of dragging onto the same conversation. Would like to ask Catherine G, because like Bina Ji mentioned, um, even in Nepal, my mother met Amal Ji, Catherine Ji in around 2014, 15, or 2015, 16, I guess, when Nepal was also drafting its new constitution. And it was a very, very difficult time because we were fighting against the constitutional makers who were about to bring the provision that said citizenship, individual can acquire citizenship from mother and father, like both the parents has to be Nepali. So it was the constitutional draft was more regressive than its previous interim constitution, and we were fighting against it, knowing completely that just because the new constitution, our demand of citizenship from mother or father, even if that comes, the conditions would still be the same. So we were sort of compromising, but at the same time fighting. And those were the times which was very difficult because the government was completely negating that we have citizenship like problem in Nepal. And there were no, like, even the impacted people, like Bina Ji mentioned, even if the person is impacted, they were not able to come out into the society and say, okay, I am impacted. I am the person who has been suffering from this citizenship laws. And her mother was the one who said, I did not do anything wrong. I took all the responsibilities of my children. I raised them well, and I've not done anything wrong to get this punishment, and I'm not afraid to speak about it. And when she did, there were people like Amal de Chickera, the ISIGCNR. They came up and sort of held her and supported her cause, which was really, really important. And yeah, which was really, really important for us at that moment. So I just want to ask sort of to Catherine G, what has what is GCNR, the Global Campaign on Equal Nationality Rights, doing to build the solidarity in international or global platform? Because I have been in so many your coalition meetings, and I've met many people who's like equally inspiring, and which I wouldn't have met if not for platforms like ISIGCNR, the global movement, which we will talk in a while about as well. So just want to know, like, what are the solidarity building efforts that GCNR is doing, and why is it important in your perspective?
Thanks, Neha. Yeah, I mean, I think that, folks that are doing this activism on the ground in affected countries, your job is much more difficult and challenging and taxing than mine, for sure. And you both talked about those experiences of feeling alone, feeling like you're trying to do this big thing and get people to care. And I think that we've seen across our coalition. So the Global Campaign for Equal Nationality Rights is a coalition of organizations that are working at the national, regional, and international levels around the world, as well as independent activists, including affected people. And we also collaborate with a number of UN agencies to increase awareness and action to end gender discrimination in nationality laws. And so across our coalition of civil society organizations, it's amazing to have this space where activists and organizations that are working on the same issue, and as I said before, ironically, are facing almost the exact same arguments by those in government that they need to convince to reform. It's been an amazing space for folks to be able to share their experiences with each other, how they've been able to overcome challenges. I know, we've seen the extraordinary campaign in Malaysia and in Nepal. And so the ability of some of our coalition members, some of them have been working on this issue for many years. They're national women's rights organizations that have been fighting this fight for a while. And some of them are organizations, including women's rights organizations, that they've been dealing with many different issues. And this is an area that they're only starting to get involved with. And so to be able to learn from organizations like Family Frontiers and like CAPN, and to hear about the really innovative and creative advocacy activities and tactics and messaging that you've been able to use is very powerful, both in the sense of learning and getting that, technical capacity building, learning about how you engage with making submissions to UN human rights treaty bodies, where governments will have to explain why they are in violation to international conventions like the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. But in addition to that technical capacity building, there is that sense of solidarity and that emotional support, which I think is so valuable. In addition to providing spaces, most of the time, because of resources, financial resources, oftentimes these exchanges will be online, but we have had opportunities over the years where we've been able to have our global coalition meetings that have been able to take place in person with a core group of organizations. And we also, over the past couple years, have been building out our network of affected people across countries that have a space online where I'm not participating. It's not for our civil society members. It's purely for affected people in our networks to share their experiences with each other. And then I won't get into all the details. You can go to our website if you want to learn more on equalnationalityrights.org. But in addition to that, those exchanges that we facilitate amongst our coalition members, we also work together on advocacy at the national, regional, and international level. working with different stakeholders from parliament, ministries, UN agencies, so that people understand, as we've talked about today, all of the harm caused by these laws and all of the benefits of gender equality and nationality laws.
Can you maybe just because we're moving towards the end of our conversation, so can you also quickly mention about the UN Civil Society Conference event that we're about to have? And I don't know, this podcast can be an opportunity to talk about it as well. But yeah, why is it important what we're doing there?
This is an area that needs greater attention at multiple levels. And so one of the things that we do is take advantage of international forums and events to make sure that this issue gets the attention that it should. So one of the ways that we're doing that is through a public online event. Everyone is welcome. Please register. When you tweet out or send out this podcast, we can also link to the registration page. So over May 9th and 10th in Nairobi in Kenya, there's going to be what's called the United Nations Civil Society Conference. So civil society from all around the world coming together with governments and UN agencies to talk about critical issues pertaining to human rights and sustainable development. But they're also having online events. So the Global Campaign for Equal Nationality Rights, in partnership with the newly launched Global Movement Against Statelessness, which is very fortunate to count Ms. Neha Gurung as a co-lead of that organization, and the UN Refugee Agency, which is the UN agency that actually has the mandate for statelessness. We've put together an event. It's going to take place on May 9th, if I have that right, May 9th at, I believe, Nepal time. I think it starts at 4:45 p.m. It's 7 p.m. Malaysia time, 7 a.m., bright and early here in the East Coast of the US. And it's going to be a fantastic conversation. It's a 90-minute conversation. We'll take questions from the audience. I know we're very fortunate to have Neha. We'll have one of the amazing affected mothers from Bina's network in Malaysia, who's been helping to lead this reform campaign in Malaysia, which is really looking very close to actually getting a constitutional amendment, which is huge. We'll also hear from stateless activists working on this issue from a minority community in Kenya called the Nubian Rights Forum. We'll hear from a representative from the UN Refugee Agency. It's going to be moderated by our amazing colleague from the Bahamas, which is one of the countries that does not uphold gender equality in their nationality law. Let's make sure I'm not forgetting anyone. We'll also have our colleague from Bahrain. So a very challenging context to, with limited civil society space for activism. Our colleague from Bahrain Women's Union will be talking about the amazing work that they've been doing to try to advance the right of women in Bahrain to pass citizenship to their children. So it'll be a really interesting conversation. I hope all of you that are listening will be able to join us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that announcement as well, Katrinji. Moving to Amalji, I think staying still on the context of solidarity building on an international platform and the level of importance that it has, because I myself have experienced the importance of having a solidarity space and knowing that there are people globally, there are people who are fighting on this issue and then who are just like me struggling. And then having that support system is like so important, not only from impacted person, but people from learned background, people who are passionately working on this issue like yourself and Catherine G. So just wanted to, I just want you to share slightly about the global movement against statelessness, which was launched recently in the global conference on statelessness. And I guess I also have to say that I have been fortunate enough that in the last year, I have had this opportunity to also serve as a co-lead for the global movement against statelessness. But please do not ask me to introduce the global movement because you are the guest right now. So I would just like you to share something about global movement and the importance of having this community.
Thank you, Neha. And if I may, before I get to the global movement, I'd like to just quickly pick up on a couple of things that Catherine and Bina said as well. And just in terms of, Catherine, your really comprehensive analysis of the benefits of law reform and the kind of the inconsistencies of how kind of discriminatory laws are kind of presented and justified. I think it's really important that we remind ourselves and that we remind states that actually at the core of gender discriminatory or racially discriminatory or any kind of discrimination in nationality laws is a deep hypocrisy, right?
Right.
And it's actually quite laughable. And what you have is a situation where states try to justify putting forward the argument that we can compromise on the rights of some people in order to further our policy objectives. And rights are non-negotiable, and they're certainly not negotiable if it's about the discriminatory access to rights, which impacts some people in relation to others. So
Right.
if you can only achieve a policy through discriminating against a segment of your society, the problem is the policy. And that
Right.
is what needs to be kind of shaped. There's this, I mean, the same example that Catherine was mentioning in terms of uh, this complete hypocrisy that you have a set of rules that applies to men, and then you find reasons to justify why those same rules shouldn't apply to women. We find that also in the context of citizenship stripping, where states will say, we will not strip citizens who were born with our citizenship and who don't have another citizenship because we want to avoid statelessness, but we will strip citizenship of people who have dual nationality. And what they're basically saying, and this is in the context of kind of national security, counterterrorism. And what they're basically saying is, we have effective ways of dealing with national security and terrorism without stripping citizenship. But we are not going to use those effective ways when it comes to dual nationals. And it's absolutely the same hypocrisy when it comes to gender discrimination nationality laws, where states say, we have very effective ways of dealing with whatever problem we've imagined in our heads when it comes to parents passing citizenship onto their children, if the parent is a man. But
Right.
if the parent is a woman, my gosh, that same solution somehow is not going to apply. So let's manufacture a way to kind of, put women in their box and treat them as inferior and non-deserving, because ultimately this all flows and stems from very archaic patriarchal kind of norms,
Right.
which still kind of dominate conventional thinking in most of the world that we live in. And in these 24 countries, one of the ways in which that has come out is through the gender discriminatory nationality laws. So I think that's a really important kind of perspective to hold, that you guys are at the forefront of a kind of an argument and a battle against hypocrisy, against irrationality, against something which is completely unjustifiable. And that is where you and we draw our strength from. And I mean, when Bina was speaking, I've heard Bina and Deepti both speak about how y'all don't have kind of, y'all haven't been trained, y'all don't have activist backgrounds, but I look at the two of you and I think, my gosh, you're two of the most impressive activists I know. And that is because it's deeply personal and because you are speaking and acting on an issue in which there's a very clear right and wrong. This is not a complicated issue. And states try to make it a complicated issue by bringing all kinds of different kind of scenarios. But ultimately, it's a very, very clear issue of discrimination. And discrimination is prohibited under international law. And I think just to kind of bring this into the conversation about the global movement, I think you find that what's the reason we've been working with partners around the world to establish a global movement is because at the heart of statelessness is discrimination and the isolation that is inflicted on people through weaponizing nationality. And the value of a global movement is that it connects these people and these communities who have been isolated. And it connects them in a way which we hope will transform the statelessness field and which will acknowledge that if we are to achieve success in fighting discriminatory nationality laws, in fighting statelessness, we are going to have to take our lead from the people and the communities who have been directly impacted by this. The right to nationality is not something new. It's been enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights over 75 years ago. For the last 75 years, it has been academics and NGO practitioners and diplomats and bureaucrats who don't have the lived experience of statelessness, who don't have the lived experience of having been impacted by discriminatory nationality laws, who've been setting the agenda, whether it's the research agenda or the advocacy agenda, and who've been trying to achieve change through the very structures which cause and perpetuate this discrimination. And over the last 75 years, we haven't made much progress. In fact, there's been significant regression in several contexts. There's been progress as well, and important progress, but on the balance of things, the situation remains very dire in several countries around the world. And so the question is, do we continue down this path of trying and retrying the same thing over and over again in a way which tokenizes stateless people, in a way which keeps them in the periphery, in a way which is extractive of stateless people for their information, for their voice, but never for their agency? Or do we recognize that there's something fundamentally flawed with this model? And that if we are to stand any chance of success in a meaningful way, in a context where the power structures are heavily stacked against us, that we need to, as our starting point and as our finishing point, kind of be centered in the voices and experiences and perspectives and expectations of people whose lives have been completely turned upside down because of the discrimination and the exclusion at the heart of statelessness, at the heart of discriminatory nationality laws. And what the global movement is trying to achieve is exactly this. Right now, I'm speaking to you from Georgia, which is a really beautiful country I've never been to before.
I was about to ask you about that as well.
Okay, and I'm here for a conference of human rights funders. And the reason I'm here is because we've been trying to, in addition to setting up a global movement, we've also been trying to set up a global statelessness fund. The fund would, when we get it off the ground, what the fund would do is it would provide multi-year unrestricted funding, as well as accompaniment support to stateless groups around the world, including groups like CAPAN and Family Frontiers. And the reason the fund is important and the reason the fund goes hand in hand with the movement is because if through the movement we're trying to create the political space that stateless people and stateless leaders and stateless community groups can occupy, the fund will provide the resourcing which will enable stateless-led organizations to occupy those spaces on their own terms. And that's really important because it has to be organizations such as CAPAN and Family Frontiers, which are setting their own agendas and which are setting our agendas. So Catherine's and mine and UNHCR's and other agendas need to be driven and set by y'all, and we need to be accountable to y'all. And I hope that the global movement will kind of mark a step change in allowing us to kind of move in that direction. Just one final thought before I kind of end. When I was speaking today, so I'm here also with Deepthi, and she
Yeah,
gave,
my mother is also there. How is she doing? I
she's
haven't
doing
been able to
really well.
talk to her
Stolen the
this
show.
today.
She's been the star of the conference, and she's spoken very powerfully. But we had our session today, and I introduced the issue, and then I handed over to Deepthi and others. And the example I used to kind of show how far we need to travel is the example of Black Lives Matter. And to ask the question, can you imagine a situation where you have a Black Lives Matter delegation speaking on behalf of their issue, which is completely made up of white men? Like, can you ever imagine a situation where that would be acceptable?
Right.
But that's exactly what has been happening in statelessness for the last 75 years. And it's overdue that changes now.
Exactly. Thank you so much for pointing that out, the importance of the advocacy, the agenda setting by the impacted people themselves. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for putting that out. I guess we're towards the end of our conversation, and this conversation has really been like so insightful for me. It's for me as well. And I hope our viewers is also listening to this, and I hope they're also finding interesting our conversation. Just to close up, I just want to have like each of yours sort of message to Nepal, and also to the affected individuals and mothers, the status and affected people, mothers and people in Nepal who are continuing to fight for their rights silently. Because how I see it as statelessness is basically as a situation where people are literally living an invisible life. They're present in their flesh and bones, but then in practice, in reality, in the structure that we are in, they are sort of invisible because they're not recognized, and their voices, like you mentioned, are uh, do not find platform as well. So I just want to um, have all of your inspiring sort of message to all the impacted people who are continuing to fight for this cause, for their own self and for this cause itself, and also a quick message to our country, basically.
Thank you, Neha, for this. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. Um, and to the brave mothers of Nepal, you have an excellent model and a courageous fighter in Deepti, and as well as you, Neha, and with your sister and your entire family, you'll have fought a great fight and continue to lead the movement of the citizenship of affected people. Neha, your family is an inspiration to all of us. Your courage and resilience serve as a powerful example of why citizenship laws must be reformed to ensure equality and justice for all. So your advocacy is paving the way for future generations where every individual will be treated with dignity and afforded equal rights under the law.
Yeah, I would say to all of the impacted mothers that are suffering because of gender discrimination in Nepal's nationality laws and their families that are suffering, first and foremost, your suffering is not your fault. This is not your fault. There's nothing you should feel guilty about. This is what we see all over the world with impacted mothers and their families. The mothers feel this incredible sense of guilt. And really, the shame is on the government for not upholding equality in the nationality law. So this is not your fault if you're suffering from this. And my words are meaningless, but to say also, I'm sorry for the suffering that you're facing. There's no justification for it. And it really breaks my heart. Know that you have folks around the world in your country, as Bina said, like you, Neha, Deepti, Kapin, FWLD, those of us that are working on this issue in different countries, we stand with you, and we will continue to fight for a world where all nationality laws uphold equality. But that doesn't help in the meantime. So I think that, I just want to say that we, I'm so sorry for the suffering that you're facing, and history is on your side. There will be a day, I'm very confident, when nationality laws will no longer deny women the same rights as men. We need to get there faster. And so that's why I then would turn my comments to those in government, those policymakers. This suffering, it is an unnecessary suffering. It could stop tomorrow. This is an unnecessary problem, a man-made problem that must have a state solution. And policymakers truly have the power to end this suffering. There really is, if you take a step back, there's nothing stopping policymakers from working together and ending this unnecessary suffering. And the beauty of it is, it not only will help all of those poor families that are suffering unnecessarily, but it actually will benefit the country as a whole. Nepal serves to benefit so much from removing the gender discrimination in its nationality laws. And I hope that the policymakers will see that sooner rather than later. We stand here to provide any support that might be useful. And I just really encourage anybody that's listening that has, if you're in government, if you have influence with someone with government, you will be looked on in the history books favorably for ending this unnecessary suffering and advancing equality and equal citizenship in your country, and Nepal will benefit from it.
Thank you, Neha. And I mean, Deepti and Catherine and Bina have kind of said it all, but I'm going to repeat something Catherine said, but do it very intentionally, to say that gender discriminatory nationality laws and statelessness are a man-made problem. And I'm emphasizing man here because they are rooted in the patriarchy, and they are rooted in kind of misogynistic attitudes to society, to how we are organized politically, socially, etc. And at the forefront of this man-made problem are amazing women around the world. And to all of you, I mean, the burden shouldn't be yours, and it's a burden that many of us are trying to step up to share with you. But nonetheless, it's a burden which very unfairly has landed on your shoulders, and people like Neha and Bina and Deepti and so many others around the world, you all have risen to this. And it's so inspiring and it's so impressive. And I think it gives me a lot of hope. It gives me a lot of hope for the future. I want to quote another amazing woman who spoke at the World Statelessness Conference, a Malaysian mother. Her name is Gayatri Siva. And she basically, her analysis of the situation was that you have structural discrimination, which is then formulated as the fault of the personal choices of the mother. So why is it left to the mother to explain and justify her choices, what happened to her, in order to ensure access to citizenship for her children? If that is the case, then there's clearly a much deeper structural problem which needs to be addressed. And that structural discrimination, it's to the detriment and disadvantage of our societies. And there will be a point in the future where we will look back at the existence of gender discriminatory nationality laws, at the existence of the kind of structural discrimination which causes and perpetuates statelessness, the way we look back today at the laws which at one point in time caused and perpetuated slavery. And to think that there are people in positions of power right now who are willing to perpetuate those laws the same way there were people in positions of power then who had it in their interest to perpetuate slavery, is a very sobering thought. But that is exactly that's exactly where we are. And like Catherine, I would also like to share a message to people who have within their remit the power to make a positive change. And my message is, use your power, not out of the goodness of your heart, but because if you don't do that, so history will judge you very harshly. And history already is judging you very harshly. And you have an opportunity here to apply the law equally. There are no downsides to this. There are only upsides. And you will be rewarded for it. You will be rewarded for doing something which really you shouldn't be rewarded for, which should have been corrected kind of generations ago. But it's now your turn. You have the power. Take that decision, and you will be rewarded for it. And my message to the mothers, the fathers, the children who are deeply impacted by these gender discriminatory nationality laws is, we stand with you in solidarity. We will journey with you, and we will continue to fight our very best to support you and to achieve change. That change will come. It won't come soon enough, but it will come eventually.
Thank you so much for sharing these words like so strongly and putting and sharing your support in a manner like every time I listen to you, Catherine G, Bina G, it really makes me feel emotional because there are definitely points when like Ranti, she had this amazing I had a wonderful opportunity with Ruanti to write a play, and then the play was performed in the panel as well in the global conference. It was called My Warrior Mother, and even there the words that we like daily go through in our life, the humiliating words that we have to listen from government officials, from individuals in the society. These are the words that we have to listen to when we are standing alone in front of those individuals, right? And then when we have to come back home alone, all those like journey all the way back home with those thoughts, with those mind, with those stigma. And when people simply use the word like genuine, like the person is genuinely citizen of Nepal. Even the word genuine is like so traumatizing for me. Like what do you mean? Are you questioning, like the person does not have to say anything to me? Like these are the words that are like really painful to listen to, and these are the words that we have to live with every day, and then yeah, go through it. And thank you so much for all the support, for all the work, genuine work, again the word that you're doing, and that you're doing at your own capacities. And thank you for all the kind words that you shared at the end. um, at the end, I would like to address to my viewers. I hope you all enjoyed and enjoyed listening to our conversation. Please tell us in the comments in the YouTube. The CAPN Citizenship Affected Peoples Network has a YouTube channel, and all these interesting conversations, all these podcasts, other episodes are all uploaded in the YouTube channel. So please do like, share, and subscribe, and let us know how do you find this conversation. And if you have any questions, queries, or supportive words that you want to share with us, do comment. And this much for today. We'll meet next time. Bye-bye.